Well, a special guest today on Absolutely Famous is not only one of New Zealand's top rugby referees, but one of the best referees on the planet from my old hometown in Blenheim. Ben O'Keefe. Ben, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I hope you're having a good break.
Yeah, mate, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you as well. It's been a great break. You need it with how long the sort of year goes with rugby, but I think sort of next week we're getting back into it. So it's been a good break, but I'm looking forward to getting back into a bit of footy.
Of course, you're a doctor as well, an eye doctor, and have you been working in that capacity during your break?
I did quite a bit at the end of November, December when I came back from overseas in the autumn internationals. But over the last 2 weeks, I've been able to just disconnect completely. I've had a few family events like some weddings and some things like that back in our hometown, Blenheim. So I've just been able to commit to that, and apart from doing a bit of training, just been enjoying the break because it's going to be a pretty busy year this year.
Yeah, some really exciting stuff coming up for you. You're over to the Northern Hemisphere soon to do some Six Nations stuff and a bit of club stuff as well.
Yeah. So the first tournament for us, Southern Hemisphere referees, is sort of jumping straight into a Six Nations game. So I've been appointed to run touch with England versus Scotland and also France versus Ireland, and I'm also going to referee the England versus France game. So we're sort of straight into it. So because it's our first game of the season, really, I'll do a bit of work with a Hurricane beforehand just to get some running lines in, but also going to do a top 14 game, so a French club competition in Paris in France in about 3 weeks. So that should sort of dust off all the cobwebs, and I'll just be into the year again. It'll be great.
Oh, pretty amazing. One thing about the Six Nations, it's never changed as far as ever since I was a kid watching it on TV. They've always had capacity crowds. There's no half-full stadiums. It's just real tribal, isn't it, between those countries?
It's incredible. It's a great competition. It's the differences between the Rugby Championship and the Six Nations. You can't really compare them because they both have their own popularity. Parts of the competitions, and one of the ones for Six Nations is the fact that they can get their home crowd almost more away crowd coming to the games, filling the stadiums, and the national anthem from both teams. You could be in Italy, you could be in England, you could be in Paris. In their away crowd, because of their travelling numbers, they'll be just as loud as the home national anthem. So it's pretty special. And Six Nations, I remember my first experience was running touch Ireland versus Wales at Aviva in Dublin, and I was just blown away by the atmosphere there, and it hasn't changed since. So I imagine England versus France at Twickenham. It's my first experience of the crunch, so it's what I call it, that big game over there. So I've done many Six Nations games, but this one's going to be pretty big, pretty special, especially with France, into a World Cup year. They're going to be wanting to start off their Six Nations campaign pretty well as England.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of pressure on France this year, although they're pretty much the warm favourites to win the World Cup. But and it's at on their home turf, so with that comes a lot of extra pressure.
Yeah, I think so. I think the home nations, whether they are favourites or not, it definitely comes with extra pressure on that team. But I think all nations, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Six Nations goes, how the games in June, July goes, the shortened Rugby Championship goes, because we'll sort of work out where everyone is. And if it's anything like it has been over the last 2 years, everyone's going to be very, very close, and we've done only a few points to each other. So it's exciting. It's going to be great. It's going to be great for France. It's going to be great for all the top teams in Europe, but all the Southern Hemisphere teams as well, and especially All Blacks. They're going to go into a year having lots of confidence from last year winning their games, and they've just got a World Cup to win now as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there in person, so can't wait. And how do you, as a referee, your persona on the field is though you're pretty relaxed, and most of the top referees look though they're pretty chilled out. How the heck do you prepare to go into a cauldron like that where, there's such parochial fans either side?
Yeah, it's a big thing. Like, we'll go to Twickenham. I think there might be about 60 to 75,000 people that will be at Twickenham Stadium in England. That's a lot of people, and the stadium is built around you, so you feel like they're right on top of you. In the game, however, when you're refereeing in the middle, you don't actually feel it or hear it because you're in the moment. You're looking at the scrum, you're looking at the ruck. You're so focused that I guess the atmosphere you can kind of push it to one side. So that's sort of how I guess you deal with it, and just through experience you get better at handling those situations. With the pressure, and it's like what you said before at the start, is that a lot of referees, the top referees in the world, what you do see on the field is hopefully what they're like off the field, because if you're trying to go into that cauldron, into that environment where you're trying to deal with 30 of the top players in the world, you try to handle the pressure of the atmosphere around you. If you're trying to think it also on top of that, trying to be being someone else, not your own personality, I think it can make it quite difficult. So I do try and go out into the game, and I'm just trying to be myself. I hope that comes across as someone that is pretty relaxed but in control, and can manage a game really well. But there are certainly times where you feel pressure as a referee, before the game, during the game, when you're going upstairs to the TMO and you're making a decision between the red and the yellow card. All these moments in the game, that's what we prepare for beforehand by practicing, by role playing, by going through clips, and then you just hope that all that preparation means that when you have to sort of nail it in that moment, you come out on the side of a good decision.
Ben, do you find that now you've vastly experienced at international level now, that the players sort of show more respect to you than they did maybe when you started, and they're trying to have you on and see how far they can push you? Has that changed?
I think there's a fine balance. I think we're lucky in a sport of rugby that the professional rugby players very respectful towards each other, and also you see them after the game, but also towards the referees. So whether you're starting off or whether you're 99 games in or 100 games in, I think we do have that respect from the players. So I quite enjoy that as a referee. But also it means that you still get players that no matter how many games you do, they try and push to the limit. And I always to a side have that conversation with players. When they ask, how do we deal with referees? How should we manage them? I also tell them, just be yourself. Push the limit as far as you can. But if you are warned, or you read that the referee's getting a little bit annoyed with you, then that's when you know when to stop. So I think that's the best thing about rugby right now, is that the professionalism and respect that players give towards referees and towards each other goes a long way. And I think when we compare that to other sports, we're pretty lucky in the rugby game.
Yeah, well, you see that after the test, don't you? I mean, I watched live last year the Springboks versus the All Blacks at Gold Coast Stadium. They're a fantastic game of rugby. They belted the crap out of each other, basically, physically. And as soon as the full-time whistle went, they're just all hugs and having a laugh. And, that is one of the great things.
That. And, you see them, share a beer after the game. And what I really enjoy is that actually filters, a lot of what happens on TV and what we see in the professional world. We want that to filter down to club rugby. And, we see that in club games throughout New Zealand, I'm sure in Australia, that you can go out and beat each other up. But as soon as the final whistle's blown, those players are shaking hands and hopefully enjoying a cold one after the game.
Do the referees get to mix with the players afterwards? You go and have a beer with the players?
We generally don't. I guess throughout Super Rugby, a lot of the games now, there aren't any after matches. And especially when COVID happened, a few years ago, it was pretty much get into the game, do the game, get out. So it's one big part of the game that I do miss. So I remember growing up, in Marlborough, but also Dunedin, where I did club rugby, and in Wellington, is that after the match, you'd go in, you'd have a chat with the players, the coaches, and they'll give you their thoughts, and you'd share your thoughts as well. But you'd share a beer, you'd share a Coke, and you'd have curry sausages or something that was given to the teams afterwards. So I really enjoyed that. At the top level, at Six Nations, some rugby championship games, they do actually have a formal after match. So that's quite nice as well, because we'll be tucked in the corner as our referees. The game's not about us, but they'll have a table for us. We'll often have the assistant referees, the TMO, and some of their partners. They may be invited to join us. So it's quite good. We have our small mini team there, and then we get to watch the presentations. Sometimes after games, I'll have players that have received their first cap or their Blazer jersey, and I like that, because often you see the fun side of rugby and how much it means to them to be able to put on an Ireland jersey, New Zealand jersey, a French jersey, because you can see the emotion when they go up to receive that cap. And some traditions, some teams do it, they have to sing a song. So I know that in Dublin, it's funny, all the Irish players, they seem to be able to sing well. I don't know whether that's genetic or not, but that's always a good aftermatch to go to.
Yeah, I bet. Fantastic. So, you get a chance to watch close up. You've got the best seat in the house, really, to the games. You've refereed Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere. It seems to be the Northern Hemisphere at the moment are playing a little bit smarter than the Southern, or judging what I've seen in the last couple of years. Do you see it that way? Is there a difference?
Yeah, you're right. Like I do get to, I'll be in July. I was over in Argentina, so I refereed the Argentina versus Scotland series, and so I was pretty closely watching that series with all the other series that were happening around the world. So we had New Zealand, Ireland, we had Wales, South Africa, so all these Northern versus Southern Hemisphere teams. the greatest thing about that series, and I think what showed us how rugby was all of last year, is that the third weekend, every team was 1-1. So it came down to the last weekend. So that's how close the teams were, is that, everyone that won in the first week, there was a different result in the second week, and it came down to the wire in the third week. So really, like, what I've been seeing is that the competition between the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere is just getting closer and closer and closer, and we saw that also in November. We saw teams only winning by, within a try or within 3 or 4 points. So I think it's pretty tight. I think it's pretty close. I think there's differing styles that both teams play in the North and the South. But also both teams are very adaptable, that they can just quickly change as well, depending on the weather, depending how the opposition is playing too, depending on what the referee's giving them. I think they also adapt to that quite well. So the professional rugby team, I think, despite where you come from, they're all at a level where they're competing pretty hard against each other, which is pretty exciting, and I think what we love to see in the game.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this year's World Cup because, as you say, there's half a dozen teams could win it if everything goes in their favour. Do you know? Are you officiating yet? Have you got confirmation you're doing the World Cup?
No, so all of World Rugby will referee. So this is almost our last window coming up. So 6 nations. There's 15 referees refereeing 15 games, and they're going to select about 12 referees to then go to the World Cup. So 12 middle referees, then they'll have, I think, 7 assistant referees, 5 TMOs. So that's going to be our whole team that they're going to select. But we're not going to find out until May. So what they'll do after the 6 nations, there'll be a bit of Super Rugby, there'll be a bit of European Championship Rugby to go still as well. So there'll be the last chance, I guess, for the selectors to watch the referees that are thinking about taking to the World Cup. And what they do is they'll basically take and look back over the last 3 or 4 years, the performances of all the referees, our physical conditioning. We've got to do physical tests as well. They'll look at our law exams. We've got to do a law exam leading into it, and that's been happening over the last few years too. So there's all these things that they take into account when they have to sit down around the table, and they'll have 15 names, and they'll pick 12 of them. So I'll find out in May. And what I've got to do is, the only thing I've got to control now is just to referee really well my game coming up, be a really good assistant referee to support my team, and then hopefully I can book the ticket as well. So we don't know yet, but there'll be a few phone calls going around in May, hopefully, and hopefully we get the good news.
Good stuff. Well, you know what you're in for. You officiated. You're on running touch in the grand final at the last World Cup, so you know exactly how exciting that is.
Yeah, that was incredible. I think it's going to be it'll be very different in another way. The Japan World Cup was exciting. It was my first one. So if I do get selected, I'll go into this one with better preparation, I think, just because you've got that hindsight. But yeah, being involved in the quarters, the semis, even the final was pretty amazing. So look, I'd love to just be involved in obviously the games at the World Cup firstly, and then if we can get involved in some playoff games, whether I'm refereeing or whether I'm supporting my other teammates. I just want the games to go really well. So yeah, I'll look forward to that hopefully.
Ben, there's been some new laws being introduced this season to try and speed up the game. Can you explain a little bit about the main ones and how you think they'll work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was part of the meetings that they had at the end of November last year. We had World Rugby, the heads of high performance. We had World Rugby, we had the CEOs, we had the international coaches, all at this big meeting in London. And what we were being told by World Rugby is that as a group, we need to work together to try and speed the game up, to make it obviously safer for players. And there's been a lot of work on that we've seen over the last few years around head contact, protecting the players after concussion too. But we're getting to a point where we want to still have that spectacle so that players enjoy the game, and also spectators can watch the game from home. They can also want to go to the stadium, like we said in the Six Nations. They can go to it, enjoy the atmosphere, enjoy the game of rugby. And a lot of the points that they raised was, at the moment, the game's a little bit too slow, because out of 80 minutes of the game, there might have only been 28 minutes where the ball's actually been passed around. So their goal was to try and increase that. So what they're trying to do, and I think Super Rugby is going to lead the way at the start of this year, which is really good, is that they're going to introduce shot clocks for kicks at goal. So it's a current law now that at the moment that if you score a try, you've only got 90 seconds to kick the ball over as a conversion. Or if you're given a penalty and you choose to shoot for goal, you only get 60 seconds to take that as well. That's current law, but as referees, we haven't really been told to enforce that by the people that are running the competition. So often you'll get a lot of kicks at goal that, they might run over by 10 seconds or 20 seconds. now those 10 and 20 seconds, they'd start adding up in the game. So what they're trying to do is enforce it so that if you don't kick the ball after the time allotted has finished, then that's it. You actually don't get a shot at goal. And they do that in the top 14 in France. And so they brought up some stats. What they did is that, okay, for the first 2 rounds in France, yes, some kickers were taking some time to get used to that new law. But by the 3rd round, no one went over 90 seconds after a try and no one went over 60 seconds. So already the game saved that time there. So they're going to do that in Super Rugby, which is great. And it's not actually going to be on the referees. I think what we'll see is a shot clock. Either the shot clock will be on TV or the shot clock will be at the stadium. So as soon as that reaches 0, the kick will be over. Which I think, as a selfish point of view, from my position as a referee, it's great because it's just one less thing that people can blame us for or point the finger at us. So it'll just be the shot clock will go to 0, and if they haven't kicked a goal, then that'll be turned over. But I think once the kickers are used to it, we won't have any conversions or penalties that will be taken over because they'll just get used to that law, and we'll just continue. The other thing is that what they're going to try and do is speed up, I guess, using the TMO. Often people complain that the TMO is entering the game too much, and that when they do, the referee's spending too much time trying to deliberate what the decision should be. But I guess a lot of that is because we've been told that we want to improve player safety. So when there is head contact, we actually want to make sure that a player is penalised for that. But what they're going to do is we're going to see it as a penalty. We're going to put it on the big screen, and within a few replays, we're going to decide whether it's a quick red or a quick yellow. If it is a quick yellow, it's going to go on report. So similar to potentially what they do in the league, we're going to put it on report, and then the judicial officer, who's either at the stadium, is going to look at it, and if they think it needs to be upgraded to a red card, they're either going to do it then and there, or they're going to do that after the game as well. So it should mean that the TMO process, instead of taking 5 or 6 minutes, when we're looking at the screen, freeze framing, slowing it down, looking at whether the contact was on the shoulder or on the head, instead of that taking 5 minutes, we might only take about 30 seconds now. So we're speeding the game up. The team's still going to get penalised. If it was a clear red card, it'll get upgraded, but we get the game moving, get the ball thrown around more than it is right now. So those are probably the 2 big ones. We're going to be encouraged to speed the scrums up, the line-outs up, obviously the ruck as well. So amongst all of those things, I think hopefully what we'll do is we'll get back some minutes in the game, more rugby, hopefully more tries, and it's more entertaining for everyone watching.
Yeah, fantastic. And also I think in community rugby in New Zealand, they're introducing that the tackle height is being lowered.
Yeah, so they're just going to try and lower the tackle height so that the tackler, their point that they want to be targeting, it should just be around chest height, okay, so just around the sternum. If they can do that, that's obviously going to decrease the amount of contact that's going to happen around the head and the neck. So especially in community rugby, the professional players at the top level, they get to train good technique. But what they're going to try and encourage at the community level is just, the technique needs to be lower. If they can do that, you're going to have less injuries and hopefully less concussions and, injuries to players in the community level.
Yeah, good idea, I think, too. Like all of us, Ben, you would have been enthralled with the Women's World Cup recently. I think, to me, it's opened up a whole new theatre of sport watching, and I was particularly impressed with Holly Davidson, the Scottish referee who refereed the final. A fantastic final under such intense pressure in that game, and I thought she was impeccable.
Yeah, so, I think all the women referees at that World Cup were outstanding. I think, we had absolutely no one talking about the referees in that whole tournament. So not just even in the final, but all the way through the pool games, the playoffs, the semis and the finals. There was no one talking about the referees. So I think they did a really good job in terms of how they managed that whole tournament. Obviously, they worked really hard behind the scenes to get a lot of alignment between what they did together so that there was consistency. And then Holly, who is an incredible referee, she's done some fantastic things throughout her career already, in sevens. I think she's done Olympic finals, she's done World Cup semi-finals, and now has done, the World Cup final in New Zealand. Had to make some big calls, so it's never nice to have to be, have the spotlight on you, have to decide between, red and yellow card, but she did that and she was 100% correct. And she just went all through, explained it really well, and I thought she was fantastic. And supported really well by assistant referees, TMO, but also all the other referees that were at that tournament. So I think there's a real push now we were seeing that all these referees were just one big group. It doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female referee. We're all refereeing at a really, really high level. So I'm hoping that we'll see a lot more of games being refereed by Holly and by all their colleagues in the future too.
Fantastic. So the men and the women referees, you do mix together. You do share notes and.
Oh yes, definitely. And I think that's one of the best things that we do is we've decided or we've worked out over the last few years is that the game's too hard just to referee by yourself. So we work a lot together through meetings, Zoom, online. When we're up north, when they come down south, and we discuss philosophies and we look at clips and actually try and be more consistent so that whether it's Keith refereeing, whether it's Wayne Barnes, whether it's Holly Davidson, we're going to be able to deliver the same picture so that everyone can understand the game because the game is very similar across the board, and I think women's rugby, men's rugby, they're all at high speed, they're very highly skilled. So the more we all work together as referees, the better I think it's going to be for everyone. So we're lucky we've got that sort of big team environment that's been created through the referees now.
Well, Ben, thanks for the chat. Always enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure the rugby fans love listening to, and putting a face to the name is always good with referees. And I wish you all the very best, and a pretty exciting trip for you in Europe coming up.
Yeah, thanks, mate, and be pleasure all mine, and hopefully get to catch up with you in France at the end of the year.
Oh, most definitely. I'll look forward to that. You can autograph my T-shirt.
Sounds good, mate.
Thanks, Ben. All the best.